Why were the blind man's parents afraid to speak to the Jewish leaders in John 9? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of John on Walking Through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to John chapter 9. We're going to be reading from verses 13 to 23. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So John chapter 9, beginning at verse 13. They brought him who formerly was blind to the Pharisees. Now it was a Sabbath when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also asked him again how he received his sight. He said to them, "He put clay on my eyes, and I washed, and I see." Therefore some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, because he does not keep the Sabbath." Others said, "How can a man who is a sinner do such signs?" And there was a division among them. They said to the blind man again, "What do you say about him because he opened your eyes?" He said, "He is a prophet." But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind and received his sight until they called the parents of him who received his sight. And they asked them, saying, "Is this your son who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" His parents answered them and said, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind. But by what means he now sees we do not know, or who has opened his eyes we do not know. He is of age. Ask him. He will speak for himself." His parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had agreed already that if anyone confessed that he was the Christ, he would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, "He is of age. Ask him." In our last lesson, we had Jesus healing a blind man who had been blind from birth. In doing so, he again taught that he was the light of the world, not only because he provides physical sight as our Creator, but he provides spiritual sight through his teachings and what he would soon accomplish on the cross. After the blind man had washed in the pool of Siloam, he was walking around Jerusalem, and people saw that he was no longer blind. They asked him, "Who did this to you?" And the man said Jesus had. They then wanted to know where Jesus was, and the man said he did not know. In verse 13 then, we find that some of them brought the former blind man before the Pharisees in Jerusalem. Now why would they do this? Well, verse 14 makes it clear that it was the Sabbath when Jesus healed the man, so I'm sure, considering what follows, that the Jews thought that not only had this man broken the Sabbath, but Jesus had as well. The Pharisees inquired how he received his sight, and the former blind man said that Jesus put clay on his eyes, told him to wash, and he would see, which is exactly what happened. This, of course, got some of the Pharisees to say that Jesus must not be from God because he does not keep the Sabbath. From our previous studies of the Gospels, we found that the Pharisees, through their traditions, misunderstood the purpose of the Sabbath. It was a time prescribed by God for rest, not for preventing someone from doing good or necessary things on the Sabbath. Healing someone on the Sabbath was an act of compassion and mercy, both things God desired man to show, so healing on the Sabbath, if one had the power to do so, was not breaking the Sabbath. But the Pharisees didn't believe that to be true because they focused so much on the little things that they left the big things, faith, mercy, and justice, undone. Others, however, saw that the man was healed, and that healing could only come from God. So they said, "How can a sinner perform such signs?" In other words, they proclaimed that Jesus must have been sent from God, for otherwise he couldn't perform those miracles. This seems logical, but alas, it caused great division among them due to their stubbornness and unbelief. It just goes to show you that when someone is stubbornly in error, it is difficult for them to see the light, even when the light is right in front of them. So they turned to the blind man and asked him what he thought about Jesus. The former blind man said that he believed that Jesus was a prophet. Even this testimony didn't convince the unbelievers. What happens next is quite peculiar. They called this man's parents. This former blind man is an adult, and yet they called this man's parents. Why? Well, it seems that the unbelieving Jews wanted to discredit Jesus' miracle, and so they called this man's parents in order to ask them if this man was in fact born blind. If the parents said that he wasn't, they could then call Jesus a false prophet and have him arrested. The parents confirmed that the man was their son and that he was born blind. But how he now saw, they didn't know. Their next statement I find rather humorous, for they told the group to ask him the questions, for he was of age. The reason I find this funny is because sometimes people will disbelieve a young person and so appeal to their parents, people who are older, for the truth. This man, however, though probably young, was an adult, and therefore fully able to speak for himself, so his parents were going to allow him to do so. The reason, though, that they said this was not humorous. It was done out of fear, for by that time the Jewish leaders had put an edict out that anyone who confessed to Christ would be put out of the synagogue. We would call this excommunication today. Since the parents didn't want this penalty, and since their son was of age to be accountable for himself, they told the leaders to leave them alone and ask him. We'll get the former blind man's response, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of John chapter 9, verses 24 to 34, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of his cross.